Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. In today's episode, I want to focus on a very interesting concept. The title is When the Wars of Language End. And so the subtitle, I've said access to meta salvation. I think I'm one of the first people to use that word, meta salvation. But in some sense, what I mean is like the awareness to a subtler structure of efficiency, let's say. You can say salvation is a position of efficiency. The opposite of salvation is a position of inefficiency. Now, why is my emphasis on language? Because, ladies and gentlemen, I realized a very shocking, how can I say it? Like, I had a cognition one day where I was wondering, why is there not world peace as a natural state? I wondered where war comes from. And I realized war comes from language. It comes from the minds of people. And what's moving in their minds are a sort of linguistic acceptance of reality. Underneath these layers of language that, let's say, decide two world leaders who are negotiating. Let's say two countries, they're negotiating. And so there's violence, there's intensity. And if a common reality cannot be accepted, pretty much two people are in different worlds. Leo Tolstoy, this Russian writer, in his writings, he shares this notion that when there was war, back in the day, like the Russian Tsar comes to all his army men and says, "The God is with us. We are the blessed kind of children of God, and God is on our side," you know. And so the other army, the Russian Tsar, as he was fighting the Japanese also have their leaders saying, in some sense, the victory is with us, the God is with us, or something, you know. And so the notion is that every person wants to be right. The world is endlessly correcting itself, and it's correcting itself through the preferences of human memory. That means right now on the surface of this planet, there is a sort of program unleashed. This program is the free will of the human design. The free will of the human design works through the technology, inner technologies of language. Because there's language, there's stories. Because there's stories, there's things in the character in the story can get. Right now, any person on this planet, they can just look at themselves and see themselves as some character. Like, forget your name, but you can totally see you are in some part of the world, in some setting, in some manifest reality. So there is a world and there is something moving in that world, and then our questions are being asked. Now, when I look at this, I see that we have had in the United Nations many political leaders in some sense communicate to one another, but the issue is the the kind of stage given. You see, if the stage from the beginning is separate, there never was a United Nation. Pretty much one world leader sees reality has to be, let's say, in the color red. One world leader sees it has to be in the color blue. And endlessly they are fighting over which color should, in some sense, define. the reality's value. This is always the fighting factor. We are not fighting for just scarce resources. We are fighting for meanings to continue. You know, if you go to a religious man and you start talking about metaphysics, I have I have indirectly done this, you know. And what occurs is that immediately you're silenced. You're silenced by those who do not need their world to change. And I find that's when our species has given up. When people are satisfied with one idea to rule them all, it's impossible. The world changes too much for there to be only one state of things having to be correct. It all has to do with agreement. We're just creatures on a rock making, we're advanced chimpanzees on a rock making sophisticated mouth noises on some level. So this is very important to acknowledge. Existence, or especially this planet, this world of ours, is like a central point. And then this point is being seen by many degrees, and each degree from the angle that it's in sees a different reality. For example, the person who believes the religious context, in some sense, believes that everything in the world, including the laws of nature, the forces of gravity, and all this, are come down to the intelligence of a prime mover. You know, a sort of creator. You see it's as if the whole world is seen through that angle. And then there are certain societies who see the opposite. Secular societies like, we don't need a creator, we are the creators, everybody's a creator, freedom of creation, freedom of speech. And the world is being seen in many ways, and it's being lived in many ways. There are no two people on this planet living in the same way. They might be even in the same building, like when people go on Wonderland and they go on that ride, that yellow ride, you know, roller coaster. It's like, there's something in this life. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many eons you have gazed upon this mortal coil. It doesn't matter. It's just, you will see that it's a process. You will see life as a process, and it's opening its eyes in many ways. And these eyes, they try to dictate a purpose for them, for their life, and so they suddenly have a value system to work with. You see, society is not just a one-sided thing. It's not just the shelter all our species kind of like rests in. It's very playfully I can say civilizations usually have two directions. They either lift off into the air or they return to the ground. Most children who are born on this planet, they trust the world. They don't doubt it. They trust what they are, they trust what the world is, and because they don't doubt it, they become perfect followers of a social program. They don't realize this social program is designed by people like them. You have to consciously live life, or you will in some sense unconsciously move, and whatever comes to you will be your definition. Reality is a complex situation. We're evolving beyond the speculation of the ego. We're evolving beyond the observable. What that means is we as creatures have gone to evolve to such a sophistication where we are like, okay, we are here. We have acknowledged that we are here. We have acknowledged that there was a beginning, there was an end. There's an end. Like we acknowledge. We acknowledge how there was a moment where before my first birthday I was not here. Like way before before I was born I was not here. The Zen masters had a saying which was kind of like the Zen koan to kind of help people see beyond their eyes, and it was like, who were your parents before you were born? Or how can you bite your own teeth? As if rather than the action being possible, the conceptual reality is hollow. So right now, there's many people who are working under assumptions which, if they truly saw to the core of their assumptions, they will see a hollowness. Okay. When the wars of language end, human experience will be valued beyond the stories given to it. We will understand the importance of every existential moment. We will revalue life. The species doesn't have a good evaluation of the lifetime. I find that when I look at this civilization of ours, when I look at this world, I feel a lot of it is being wasted. I feel people are just walking in wastelands throughout the day. These wastelands are how their energy in all the moments of their day, only a little aspect of it can be utilized. We don't understand. We are designing the world with language. We're designing our sense of meaning through language upon this world. I am looking at that object, calling it a tree, but before I had heard the word tree, what was it? It was simply the presence of the moment. There was this enlightened man in India by the name of Kabir, Kabir. And Kabir looks at his student and says, "Student, tell me, what is God?" The student looks at Kabir and said, "God is the breath inside the breath. It is the presence to your personality, which Mr. Within is saying is attributeless, because what you feel is temporary, has attributes. The intelligence of the moment has made that which is manifest seem temporary, and that which is not manifest to automatically be given the opposite value. You know, it's as if I ask you, does a universe end, and you're like, yeah, man, you know, like when a star, like how can I tell you? It's as if like as planets break, so do many things crumble in the celestial landscape. But I'm saying that the whole idea is is that if the world closes its eyes, how dare we say our eyes remain open? People don't realize meaning was created as if man created his own dictionary. Language has to do with the administration of the internal and external. Because there is a sort of the ability of visualization, the evolutionary possibility of imagination. A person can sit on their balcony. Right now I'm sitting on my balcony and I can look at my backyard and visualize like a sort of glowing canoe just floating in the air, right? Like my mind can imagine something, right? But that image that I am seeing in my backyard, that canoe going between the trees slowly, moving, floating between the trees slowly, that canoe does not exist externally, it is internal. So the position of language was this division of the internal. How there's an inner and outer. It's like the whole point of the biological design was like this. It's as if our eyes have opened. It's like we have the eyes of a caterpillar in a butterfly's. We have the eyes of a butterfly in a caterpillar's body. This human existence, I find, is like that. It's as if there is something, some intelligent presence to the moment that has no, it cannot even interpret fear. It is not dualistic in its intelligence. The wars of language end when the games of presence begin. When the human being looks at this life and understands it's not about just endlessly proving that one's view of the world is correct. This is a sort of it's like it's not, you can't even blame people for the inefficiency of the system they use, of the technology they use. It's as if the person has a bad car, but you cannot say they are a bad driver. You see, and so we as human beings, each of us find ourselves, this is what I say is the inner technology. You see, we have external technologies, people at the frontiers, for example Elon Musk, contributing to that. But when I look at our inner technologies, I don't really see a value of the inner technology. I see people who escaped out of their own ideas and are worshiping other ideas. When I looked at the New Age community, I am like, I kind of put my hand, my palm over my head. I was shocked. I am like, why should we behave like ancient times when this modernity is a completely different circumstance? We take inspiration, but the inner technology is how ideology moves the phenomena, the biological phenomena. You know, how the orchestration of your attention to the world occurs. Something important about the title, hopefully I got across, what just to be emphasized. War starts in the minds of men. And if war starts in the minds of men, and what is in the minds of men is not per se a sort of physical thing, you know, it's a subjective landscape of consequences and expectations and assumptions. Internally, you will be pulled towards the attributeless. Externally, you will be pulled towards that which is, it's like an infinite movement of attributes. Albert Camus, this French philosopher, has this incredible quote. He says, in the depth of winter, I found within myself an invincible summer. And that invincible summer, Mr. Within considers, is a sort of instantaneous presence of your attention prior to the contents of your attention sculpting you into a certain format. You see, the point of human life is that when it looks at all the other creatures and species, it sees none of the species have the evolutionary ability. They are not conscious that they will die. And let me tell you what I mean by that. They're not subjectively conscious they will die. What that means is, like they say, what really distinguishes an animal from a human is that the human knows all this will end. Therefore, it has that extra space of conscious decision making. But many other species, they're less. It's as if their attention has not evolved to a point where they want to move beyond nature's program. We are like mini versions of the universe walking around in the universe. This might be a kind of intense statement, but I feel all children uh, have to put an attempt to find the actual Earth. Our first view of Earth is limited to our experience. Literally, we can't see anything. It's like we can't. The mind requires chaos and order to exist as a character in a changing world. The stories of our life, they go up and down. They're vibrating between two polarities, two sorts of value, an existential value and a non-existential value. You know, when the person suddenly thinks there's no hope, there's no point to existing, that means the non-existential value has moved beyond 50%. Okay? Life is one of those things where if you want to know everything all the time, it will burden you. If you want to not know anything all the time, it will also burden you. It has to do with an elegance of being able to ride the waves of your moment of being. You know, I have this talk. The title was called "Riders of the Abyss." And every person finds themselves in the abyss of where their meaning in some sense dismantles. There's an edge to language. I call this the language threshold. That means I sat down trying to conceptualize, trying to see what the strongest so I wanted to find the survival of the fittest, and the survival of the greatest thought. And so I looked at it. I looked at language. I looked at the design of the world. I wondered about its positions. And what you realize is because the mind finds itself a witness, an observer of objectivity, the opinions upon objectivity seem to be moving in a way that have nothing to do with objectivity, right? That means a person can talk in front of you, but you can be sitting there and not even have your attention there. You could be like in your past or thinking of the future, and yet the person in front of you is talking, right? So the attention can move, yet I find the most crucial thing is to really discover your presence. Presence is a concept that many people don't discuss, and in some sense, unfortunately, Western culture has in some sense forgotten. Back in the day, it was important how in some sense a man entered a room, how a person entered the room. The person would have a presence. Their presence would not just be based on their social status or the status of like what kind of family member they are. For example, your grandfather walking into the room or something. It has to do with how the being is acknowledging the presence of life. And if you are a person who is just seeking happiness, I find that's blindness. If you're just seeking misery, I find that's blindness. This life, there's something unique about it. That somebody could sit here and tell you a story, and that story could be hollow. Because the language is being reanimated or authorized by your experiences to make sense. For example, if I'm let's say at a bus stop and somebody comes and speaks Japanese to me, after the person says arigato, I will not know what they're saying. you know? And I would see that the reason I don't know is because those sounds entering my ear have no sort of subjective context or a subjective landscape to lit up. What you don't know, you can't enter. If you don't know there's a party going on, you can't get to that party. You know? Right? So what I'm saying is it has to do with what is in the sphere of the awareness of the person. But when we look at life, a lot of language is seen. It's as if the purpose of language is to be a mirror for matter. It's a mirror of matter, and as matter is looking at this mirror of language, objective reality is wondering about its subjective position. It sees it cannot be just objective. There's a sort of chaotic thing that I kind Mr. Within's this is kind of Mr. Within's recommendation to all secular societies in the world. Do not make matter your God or your or do not make matter the only truth, or you will see nothing more than matter. What that means is, if I just choose to live for myself, I will not see the lives of others. I will see my life in others. I find life is not per se like a certain definable state. It's not like anybody who gives an answer to the purpose of life uh, is you can clap for them, but that clap is short-lived. Because life it doesn't have a meaning, because language is an effect of how it's being caused or how it is a cause. So when we wonder about the cause of all causes, because we're a person wondering about it, inevitably the unconscious will be personalized. So when I looked at God, God was a revelation, but it was not a revelation of an oblivious person to, in some sense, uh, like what we think was revelation was an evolutionary position of the creature. So scientists look at religious people and it's like, oh man, these guys don't know they evolved after billions of years. Religious people are looking at scientists and being like, man, these guys don't realize God's moving everything. Like, and so I see this. I see this. It's just different banners held by people who, if they truly got down to see who they are as people, they would no longer be in the framework of a person. Life is best lived when the person uses fear and uses all their emotional contexts to administer, in some sense, a sort of attempt to clear. Like, think of it this way. I want you to see this world on this planet. It needs leadership. But the leadership is a very unique situation because rather than us thinking there are 8 billion people plus civilized human beings to lead, it's as if every person is immediately a leader and commander of their own attention and life. You are a commander of your life attention, pretty much. And so you have to lead internally. There is a war, there is an inner war that must be confronted for the true presence to be seen in some sense. This inner war is a war of language. It's pretty much how you, as a moment of being, have had exposure to waves of data. And as you are a data processing creature by nature, as the sensory data is even leading to the process, it's as if there's sensory data here and the process is occurring, right? We administer it in the sense that we want to bring the world, this unknown world, into our known control. Because we want to do this, we make the free will the ultimate position. Anything beyond our free will, the ego will protect. The ego is the guardian angel of the free will. You see, in ancient mystical traditions, I find that they had certain errors as well. Their errors was that they thought the ego was the illusion of the world. Any person who wants to escape from an existential moment will most likely get entrapped in infinite experiences. But it's kind of like the person wants to see the food at the dinner table, but they're looking for the dinner table underneath the dinner table. And they can't find it wherever they look because they can't see what is, in some sense, above their head. You know, I don't know how efficient these Mr. Within talks are. I don't know if human beings are just a statistic. I mean, I know we are not. I know that we have a creative responsibility that just comes based on our evolutionary position. You know, it's like people feel that you just appear in existence and you could do what you want. You know, I kind of understand that. I felt like that. But there's a poet named Rabindranath Tagore. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. This dude thought that it was just happiness and joy and yay, let's just have a good time the whole time, you know? And then he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. And what he means by there is that it's the first thing. When I see evil, I'm like, nice. We have kids running around. Violence is the sign of an inferior mind. Do you know why? Do you know why? Because it is the denial of the opportunity of the superior mind. In every moment you have done something inefficient, there has also been the awareness of something efficient that could have been done. And of course, the best advice I've heard is regret is nothing to hold. If you ever have regret of something, throw that regret, like literally throw it on the ground or throw it somewhere else. Because this world changes so much that how we think things are and how our memory is elusive. And this was very chaotic for me, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sharing this with you. The revelation of the cracks of inaccuracy in my memory structure. Okay, and I'm talking about all human beings. So there's slight variations. You think every day you're remembering your past the same way. You're not. There's days you will wake up, you will feel this life is too long. There will days you will wake up, you feel this life is too short. There will be days you will wake up, you will not even see night and day. The way our society is built, because people are choosing to live through an edifice. Society is something like, it's like a battlefield. People go with a sword and shield in hand. The shield is like their personality, the limits of what they get offended by or not offended by, like who they are, and the sword is in some sense the retaliation to whatever challenges come to them. I feel we're all smart creatures. We all have an evolutionary past of our ancestors learning how to fight, because war could occur at any time. You see, it's as if when man entered tribal dynamics, it was a chaotic moment, and a moment I personally in history, it's like I feel like I have read history, and those, like, I don't know what to say, guys, but you gotta read a history book with a box of tissues, because you will cry. You will cry at the chaos that in some sense some of our ancestors had to walk through. And then when you see that chaos exist in 2019, a part of you wants to in some sense rip that history book and shout to all your ancestors, we have failed if we have not evolved since then. That means, trust me, it's not that honor is always there. We can't all be just like a civilization like samurai, just have honor all the time. There's sometimes things that our ancestors have done which have dishonored the civilization. But we realize, regardless, the face of the person is sculpted through the various challenges of life. What I think needs to occur is that it's going to be a very unique thing. The next phase of the evolution of our civilization. When I say civilization, I mean the sum influence of all societies on the surface of this planet, stretching from the most tribal and primitive societies in the Amazons to the most advanced and evolved and ambitious people in Silicon Valley. I am talking about this world we're in, and we're a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and the systems of our governance have in some sense come into position by ourselves. Okay, we are the passing down of the same genetical material at our ancestors. What that means is we are the karma of our ancestors. World peace has not to be cannot should not be defined for the species based on just civility and order. We don't want a utopia of happiness. We want an advanced reality. And an advanced reality means that before we advance it, before we act upon new ideas, we have to see the data that is here now, and we have to wonder about the continuity of that data. That means I have looked at my ancestors and I have seen ways they have lived, and I have asked myself, should this way of living continue? And I realize it's as if it's like the life of this whole world is the life of the DNA, objectively. It's a play of forces. You see, at first you want to change something. At first you think you're something and you want to do something. Then you go realize you are something, but you're doing something in nothing. And then when you realize you're doing something in nothing, you wonder what is doing something in nothing, and you realize nothing is being nothing. And when you realize nothing is being nothing, the concept of somethingness has to make a decision. It has to make a decision that whether it wants experiential expansion through through selfless responsibility, or it wants limited access to a sort of violent mode of access. You see, the thing is, even if human beings stop being violent, there would be moments where communities would get bored. Violence is not all the time inspired out of hate. Sometimes it's inspired by the nature of the being. You see, you look at a tree, you see it has naturally grown in a certain way. Its branches have extended in a certain way. When you look at a human being, you see their nature. Their nature, how they are naturally being, has extended through various ways of their personal behavior. And I feel this is the transition. Right now in 2019, we are kind of ideal worshipping bewildered beasts that have technological vehicles. I'll make a very important, I'll say something very important right here. If we look at the caveman, the early cavemen, who in some sense drew pictures of stuff on cave walls, we see the only way the caveman could draw that picture on the cave wall was if it was not being chased by an animal. You see, it was as if there was not a violent intrusion in the interior artwork that was sprouting in that moment. Every moment has an intelligence to it. Okay, sometimes that intelligence is dictated by you. Sometimes it's not the world that's happening to you. You are happening to the world. You are moving, and definitions are arising, and meaning is pouring out of your attention. But there are moments where the world happens to you and you can't do anything about it, and you're like, this is how the sun wants to shine today. This is how cruel the world wants to be today. This is how peaceful the world wants to be today. And every day the world has changed. So for me, I feel when I was younger, I subconsciously accepted this challenge, this sort of important challenge to see what is happening every day. Every day I wake up, it's as if there is the story of me. There's my memories. There's the ability of imagination. There's the identity that formulates as I go. Like when I go get a glass of water from the fridge, there's a person there, there's a name there, there's a sense of self there. But for example, that moment when I close my eyes at the end of the day to sleep, it's as if the meanings of that world, that day, and what was kept in that moment is slowly fading. So what that means is every day people think retirement is something that they do after a certain age, like after 65. All right, man, you're too old, retire. I don't believe it should be seen that way. The concept of retirement has to do with the initiation of an activity. So the thing is, the person starts their career every day anew. And then at the end of the day, when they're about to sleep, they're retiring from that career. My grandfather, on the paternal side, he passed away when I was 10, but there was like in 2016 when I went to Iran to talk to some of my relatives, I asked them about certain things that my grandpa would say because I wasn't there. I was asking my relatives about their experience of my grandpa. My grandpa, my relative told me in that moment, my grandpa had this thing he would say that whenever you enter after work, you come home, you take off your hat, and when you take off your hat, like when you come to my grandpa had this mentality whenever at the after working, he was a businessman, industrial businessman. He had a um, this company. He pioneered this company called Sepahan in Iran that makes industrial pipes. And anyways, my grandpa had this mentality that when he would come home, he would no longer be a working man. He would be a father. So as if his rather than his personality being defined all the time as one stable thing going through everything in this life, when he was working, he was a working man. When he was home, he was a father, you know? And so that's the importance of how far we allow certain ideas to carry on in the attention of the moment. All of this recalibrates. This is why I'm saying we're all advanced communicators. That's the term I like. That for me, it's like I stopped seeing people as like, it, for me, there's only two kinds of people in this existential plane. In this world, I acknowledge only two positions, right? Everything else is like theatrics. I see advanced communicators and I see pilots of consciousness. That's it. The advanced communicator is a sort of realization of your moment that you are an advanced communication of this universal sector. You are the most advanced species on this rock. Okay? If you have questions, what would the rest of the inferior species? They must be like in hell then. You know, if we don't know what to do, then what the hell do they do? The animals know. You know? You see, a lot of the species on this planet, they don't have a sophisticated self-awareness. We have a sophisticated self-awareness where the self could move in its mind and therefore it could move its body in many ways. But many animals, they can move in their mind. If you look at a lot of animals, you see they don't have actually a brain. They are just the environment's forces moving the intelligence. I mean, they do have a brain. I'm not saying like a lion doesn't have a brain. I'm saying I'm saying that nature is moving itself without a conscious interpretation of itself subjectively. We do that as unique creatures, as Homo sapiens. It is our gift. Mahatma Gandhi, he said something one day that is like people who were following him were like, holy shit, this is next level deep. And Gandhi said, every day I die as who I am. Every day I am born anew and I die as, it's like every day he's a new self. It's as if Gandhi's motivation didn't have to do with his memory and his idolization of the past. I mean, in some degree, you cannot avoid a thought in your awareness. Like a person could hold roses, but they could be standing beside a dumpster and they could smell those roses. But trust me, you'll be smelling something else too. So, so reality is one of those things that an idea cannot be avoided. It's as if the Sadhguru, this wise man on YouTube, he says, uh, he's this mystic. He says, um, the content of your mind is not your choice. That means somebody comes and tells you, don't think about an apple. Guess what? The word apple entered your ears. The thought of an apple has appeared. I find everything we think about externally has an internal position, and everything that is internal does not necessarily have an external position. There are qualities to the moment that are not based on a dualistic condition. They're not in a, like this world of ours, ladies and gentlemen, it's dualistic. You know why? Because there's space and there's stuff in space. The stuff is like one polar side, the space is another side. It's as if the container of the glass of water is one polarity and the water in the glass is another polarity. And human beings are looking at human consciousness and they're wondering about its limits, pretty much. And that's where we find ourselves. And our greatest tools and technologies are mathematical, are linguistic. You see, it's like mathematics was a language. I consider math, by the way, a language. Like literally Japanese, you can look at the world through numerology. And to be honest, mathematics is prior to even the way modern languages function. We had to be able to see phenomena as separate and to also be separate in value. That means rather than we just saw one planet, we started seeing nations. Rather than just seeing nations, we started to seeing cultures, communities, societies, and when we even saw beyond further, we saw individuals. And you can say the human question of where life should go in some sense is starting from a very individual position. We are the small looking at the big, wondering what the big means and how small we really are. But the thing is, any belief you have, you will eventually see the other side. That's the truth. It's kind of like just a pattern in history. Where there are civilizations that are objectively oriented, then people come and say metaphysical stuff. There's civilizations where, like ancient Greeks, the average person walking down the street looked at the clouds and were like, oh my god, a god standing on top of that. So you see, whether the world is a spiritual place or not, there's always a counterculture. There's always an awareness to every action. This is why the final kind of thing you can do on this planet, the sages would say it's so simple. The sages would say, don't stress yourself out too much. Don't think of what's going to happen and all this stuff. Don't try to get defined by the chaotic elements of the world too much. And the sage would say, there's only two things you can do. You can either trust it or you cannot trust it. But if you trust it, you see its magnificence. You will see how the light in your eyes is the sculptor of your tunnel of belief. We are alive once. Ladies and gentlemen, every day happens once. Ever since I started these talks, there has been days where people have come and said, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? One of my close friends once asked. And it was just this feeling that it's as if every day is like a blank canvas and it's up to your free will in regards to what it draws upon. One thing I think I was blessed in some sense in my childhood, because I was raised in Iran, was that I began to see in marketplaces and bazaars and just pretty much in the overall culture a sort of street smart mentality that was required. The street smart mentality, the person who is street smart, they have an alertness, they have an attention to things that others don't. And they have a flexibility in moving their attention. They're not idea-oriented beings. This is why, this is going to sound strange, but this is one of Mr.Within's views, like this is how I see it, that some of the most like vicious, intense businessmen and negotiators on this planet, they're not existing as a body. They're existing more as a mind than a body. So their reality has a sort of unknown orientation. It's kind of like they did this test result on rats, and I heard this from Jordan Peterson in one of his lectures. He said they put this like alpha rat, this bigger rat with a younger rat, into like one kind of room. The bigger rat would win, as these two rats would get bored and they would play games, you know, kind of wrestle. And the bigger rat would always win, but the bigger rat realized if it did not let the smaller rat win, the smaller rat would not play. You see? And so here's the profound thing, guys. It's kind of like it's like a playful, foolish thing in the design of the human being. That we all have beliefs, and when we live in a world and those beliefs are shattered, we try to hold on to them. We're like that bigger rat in our universe. In the world you see right now, you feel like you're the biggest rat. You know, like when I'm in my room and I'm cleaning my room, for example, I am like literally the god of that moment. I am the free will moving things, organizing things in that room. You see, it's actually making me feel my free will is the biggest thing in the room. Now the thing is, the free will has to, it can't take full responsibility. Very few beings, I believe, in this whole universal sector, in this plane of existence, very few beings can, in some sense, um, truly comprehend themselves through non-existence. Very few beings. Most people, they're afraid if the light goes out. It's as if we feel this temporary life like we're like a candle. This consciousness, again, like the candle's been lit. Now, this consciousness, what does it do? It illuminates the world. When it illuminates the world, the forms in the world get shadows. These shadows become the subjective realm. You can say thoughts are a shadow of reality behind your eyes, and not you don't have to like I'm using that word poetically, but for me there is an elegance. There is the mysteries of the world. In my childhood, it's as if the story this world of ours in its inefficiency is selling us is that you are just what you think you are. Nonsense. Nonsense. It's as if you looking at your hand and you thinking that your whole body exists because of your hand. Is like do you see what I mean? It's as if you idolize the subconscious categories behind the subconscious context to the concept you have. It's so important because this is why it's not just it doesn't have to do, like, even though I say there's a war of language, belief systems are fighting for the attention of human beings, but what I'm saying is it's about just awakening to the self of selves, which is the presence of the whole intelligence in this universal sector. It is when you become an advanced communicator by realizing this lifetime is not a prison, it is not a cage of suffering, it is not a battlefield, it is an opportunity for the free will to move. So the free will's values in the space it has. This is why human beings hold freedom as an ultimate value. Because in freedom there is space. There is space to recalibrate. I find that this is what defines the health of the being. The understanding and importance of living phenomena. The world, because of its technological innovation, has become, I guess, is neglecting or is ignoring nature's evolutionary road. It's as if we created our own road while nature was taking us somewhere. Excuse the interruptions, guys. To be honest, I'm just throwing words in empty space when I talk. And not throwing words in empty space, that's pretty much language. The free will has a sort of energetic capacity to move matter behind its eyes. Okay? Your free will will eventually become your ally. For most people, because they have egos, because they want to ideologically exist in superior ways, they actually objectively, the nature of the world feels like the person is acting strange, and therefore the karmic structure, the karmic outcome of the person becomes strange. I find it has to do with an awareness of nature. Something I guess I can share here. I'm starting this new YouTube channel, dear listeners. It's called The Spiritual Journalist. And I'm pretty much, it's a playful channel. Pretty much I'm going to go interview people about what they feel, what is happening behind their eyes. Pretty much it's a channel that has an effort to try to see what the person is seeing behind their eyes again. So I remember I recorded a podcast with a bunch of friends. It hasn't been uploaded, but in that podcast, there was a discussion of the nature of imagination and how it comes to the person and what creativity is, in some sense. And I remember I wasn't like my position, in some sense, something I shared there was that for me, imagination is very natural. That means some part of me remained foolish enough to still adore the simplicity of the natural world in this technological era. And my position was that thoughts are like suddenly a bird comes and lands on a branch, suddenly a thought comes. When I am giving these talks, for me, the ultimate preserver of the meaning and the value of the talk is a natural rhythm. I have understood that knowledge is not just in books. That is a strange labyrinth children are being sent through. Knowledge has to do with the application of the free will in the material template. Pretty much you exist as a manifest phenomena. This manifest phenomena can be classified in as many ways you want. You can see this world as a bad place. You can see this world as a good place. You can put salt on your meal, or you could put pepper. It doesn't it doesn't matter the good and evil that much. What matters is the efficient movement and the lack of ideological ignorance. You see, that is the issue. Because ideological ignorance will make the person own the environment. That's the issue. Okay? If you see that rather than you thinking this physical body is your physical body, okay, you should see it as it is just how this part of the world has grown so far. And there's contentment. There's contentment of a omniscient, blissful nature that finds you when you really see your true face in the mirror and you finally know what you are. You stop chasing, like again, a bewildered beast in space and time. You gain access to a sort of underlying freedom, which doesn't have to do, it's as if because man's attention has in some sense been slaved on this planet, slavery is a very important thing to be aware of. Okay? For me, it's as if that's one of those things where I would take tissues from the tissue box and wipe the tears off my face because I realized the savageness of man's inner realities was to control. We don't realize what chaotic behavior evolved us to this point. It's sad. It's sad how, in some sense, we had to kill one another to continue. Yet now we are realizing it's as if, why? Why should we have an objective hopelessness dictate reality, then a subjective hopefulness for in some sense some better system? I mean, it's like it just has to do with the responsibility level of the whole civilization. If the whole civilization feels responsible for itself, it will evolve at an advanced pace. It's as if the issue is, it's not that nothing is happening, nothing is being done. It's just that the speed of the advancement of our civilization and its efficiency, it's slowing down because the citizens of the world are not given a shit for the world they're in. The world they're in is as if it doesn't matter. Let's forget that and let's just run into our subjective realities. Let's just be entertained till the day we die. That's the mentality, which is brings about the slowness of the evolutionary kind of movement. There's different ways that technology changes the person if you look at it. One, the technology is the user of technology creates a technology, and then the user of technology changes, so the technology has suddenly changed in meaning and value. Or sometimes the technology changes and then the user of technology updates. It's very hilarious, but every time my iPhone had an iTunes update, it was as if that was changing the shape of the app of the phone. Do you see? So what I'm trying to say is like it's updating all the time. It's like the metaphysical position, or that kind of unique meta salvation concept I've kind of designed for this talk. It's like it's as if man does not try to become a god, but wonders what the freedom of the creator in a creative system is, what that value is like. You free yourself from the stories of inefficiency you have believed. And then you come into a sort of neutral observance, and then you realign. It's as if you resupply and enter reality with different frameworks of how your attention navigates. And it's rhythmic. So you gotta abide, every day has a sort of flow to it, you know? Once you enter that flow, it's as if there's no karma. It's weird, but it's as if like kind of like an athlete who goes in the zone, or a rock star on stage who goes in the zone, that sort of instantaneous relationship with how the moment is occurring and changing. It's like whenever you consciously change with a changing world, the unconscious doesn't break your attention. Like chaos doesn't occur because chaos is moving the order, so your attention is on the order. It's strange. I don't know. I've explained it better in some other talks, but anyways. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste. As the wars of language end, novelty begins to write again. Much blessings and namaste.